just a stupid boulder.
It's not just a boulder. It's a rock. A rock. A rock. It's a big, beautiful old rock.
Ladies, gentlemen, and fellow druids of all ages, how do you feel about standing in the eye of the storm, surrounded by an orbit of comets the size of your torso, flinging around with the wind speed of a tornado? This incredible new druid build is only possible thanks to the new druid unique in Season 2, the Dolmen Stone, which makes Boulder rotate around you if cast during Hurricane, rather than just sort of rolling away from you and, only hitting enemies a couple of times. And this is finally what it has taken to make a viable Boulder build exist, and it's so much more than viable. It's easily one of the best builds for Druid this season, especially once you get your gear perfectly statted. I tried to make Boulder work multiple times in the past, with very sad nothingness to show for it, honestly, with builds that were just sort of slow as molasses, even on equal level content, even if they could survive. I love Boulder. I love the aspect that makes Boulder a core skill, but there just was no way to make that into a viable build until this season, and now that I've got my Druid up and running, I wanted to make this as soon as possible, as soon as I had the pieces I was looking for to get it done right and do it my way. So let's talk about this build. The main version that I'm presenting and showing is built for just general everyday content. Nightmare dungeons, blood harvest, helltide, things where you will expect to be trying to move quickly through groups of enemies and the occasional boss here or there, but I will also present the alternative options for specifically single target boss killing, where this can actually excel a ridiculous amount later on, with some demonstrations on the handy dandy new training dummy. As far as it goes, this build is just pure fun. You get to walk around creating an absolute barrier of doom in front of you where it doesn't even feel like your responsibility if something happens to walk into it and die.
I'm gonna be doing this. If you get hit, it's your own fault.
The typical issue this build would run into, though, because of the fact that the aspect makes Boulder a 50 spirit cost core skill, is simply spirit consumption. But I've got a neat combo going on that fixes that without really changing the damage output much too, so stay tuned for that. We'll start off then with our skill points and where to put them, then talk about our spirit boons of choice, go into our legendaries and uniques to make this a really properly top tier build, the way that you want to aim your stats as well for maximum damage and survival, and then of course the Vampiric Powers unique to Season 2 that help amplify this a ton as well. After that we have our Paragon board set up to boost this up, and then just any tips that I have for playing the build yourself. First then, let's dive into these skill points here, and actually we're going to be going with Wind Shear as our basic. Normally you would want Storm Strike here, but because Boulder has knockback, when you have a bunch of them in your Hurricane, it actually knocks enemies out of melee range, so we have to use a ranged basic skill. Yeah, I know that does sound a bit odd, but trust me, it is worth it. We also take Enhanced Wind Shear, which makes it have a vulnerable application chance, and then also Fierce Wind Shear for more attack speed that actually stacks up as you hit enemies with this skill, which will just funnel into more attack speed later on, and thus more damage in the build. In the core node cluster, we just want a bunch of passives, actually 1 rank of Heart of the Wild here, mostly just as a gateway to get 3 ranks of Wild Impulses, which increases your core skill cost by 9%, but increases their damage by 15%, so definitely a positive trade-off. Then we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of Predatory Instinct for 6% bonus crit chance against close enemies, and 3 ranks of Iron Fur, 9% damage reduction while in bear form and for 3 seconds after leaving it. Then we move to our defensives, and here we're going to be grabbing Blood Howl specifically for a little bit of healing when you cast it, as well as Enhanced Blood Howl, which reduces the cooldown of this by 1 second every time you get a kill, and then Preserving Blood Howl, which makes this actually increase your attack speed by 4 seconds after using the skill, which is incredible when clearing groups of mobs, as you can keep that active pretty much constantly. Then we skip the companion node cluster just completely and come to the bulk of the build, which is the Wrath node cluster. Here we want to take all 5 ranks of Boulder. I have some extra ranks that I'll talk about when we get into the gear later on. Then you want to take Enhanced Boulder as well, which actually makes it apply slows at the end of its lifetime, and then Savage Boulder, which increases a boulder's crit chance by 3% every time it does damage. And then with them swirling around you for ages, that will add up quite a lot, which is why you see constant crits in this build. Then of course we're going to be taking Hurricane for a radius of damage that is around you, as well as Enhanced Hurricane to apply a slow to enemies in the radius, and then Savage Hurricane, which reduces the damage of enemies in the radius of Hurricane by 20%, a very sizable amount. The main reason that we need Hurricane in this build, even though it is just good in general, is because of course that's what allows the boulders to actually rotate around us and hit enemies constantly, which makes them actually worth using as your main source of damage. After that then, we're going to be grabbing Trample, which will be incredible in this build for 3 reasons. 1, it grants Unstoppable to break you out of crowd control and activate some other things. 2, if you get Enhanced Trample and then also Savage Trample, then you're also able to get a bunch of spirit every time that you cast this. And then 3, it's just an excellent movement tool if used correctly that will speed up your clear times significantly. After that, we grab some passives here, 1 rank of Elemental Exposure, mostly just as a gateway to get 3 ranks of Endless Tempest for bonus duration on Hurricane, but also Cataclysm if it happens to proc from Nature's Fury when we use Petrify. Then we take 3 ranks in Crushing Earth for 15% increased damage against crowd-controlled enemies with Earth skills, and also Stone Guard for 3 ranks for 12% increased damage with Earth skills if you have more than 50% of your maximum life as Fortify, which we do constantly, mostly thanks to our 3 ranks of Safeguard over here, which makes Earth skill critical hits fortify you for 7% of your life. After that, we're going over to our ultimate cluster, and here we're going to be taking Petrify, which stuns everything in a pretty massive radius around you, as well as increasing the crit damage that you do to enemies affected by a massive amount while the effect lasts. Bosses don't get stunned, but they do get a higher crit multiplier and longer duration from this too. We also get Prime Petrify to make it last longer, then also Supreme Petrify, which refunds some spirit if you kill an enemy that is affected by this skill. Then we just take a bunch of passives here as well, 3 ranks of Defiance for 12% increased damage against elites with nature magic skills, 3 ranks of Natural Disaster for bonus damage with Earth and Storm skills depending on certain conditions applied to enemies, which we do in fact apply constantly. Then 3 ranks of Resonance over here, which gives you 6% increased damage with nature magic skills, with that bonus tripled to 18% if it is an Earth skill used after a Storm skill or vice versa, which fits in this build very nicely. After that, we grab 3 ranks of Quick Shift over here for 15% increased damage on shape-shifting skills that transform you, which will count for our boulder constantly. Then for your final point, we have our key passive, of course, which is going to be Nature's Fury in this build, giving Storm skills a 30% chance to trigger free Earth skills of the same category and vice versa. This is a major facet of our build, and it simply wouldn't work properly without it, which I will explain more in the actual gear section then. But with these skill points done, let's talk about our spirit boons here. In the Deer Path, we are of course going for Wariness for 10% damage reduction from elites. Then in the Eagle Path, you want Avian Wrath for a 30% crit damage increase. Then we're going to be bonding with the Wolf and taking Energize for the lucky hit chance bonus to restore spirit just to help balance this out a bit. Then we also take Calamity for bonus Petrify duration. After that, in the Snake Path, you want to take Calm Before the Storm for a 10% lucky hit chance to reduce your ultimate skill cooldown by 2 seconds. Moving on from that then, let's talk about our gear, specifically our legendary aspects and uniques of choice. First and foremost, of course, is the Dolmen Stone unique. None of this build functions without it. It is the linchpin that makes it work. Awkwardly, it gives you bonus rank 2 Wrath skills, but in the act of making Boulder a core skill, it removes the Wrath tag from the skill, so it doesn't actually give this more ranks. But the unique itself carries the build anyways because of the effect. Then we're actually using a few more uniques here as well. Vasili's Prayer over here, which makes our Earth skills count as Bear skills, so that Boulder will trigger our Bear bonuses and will change your form, activating some other damage bonuses in itself. But then we also use Insatiable Fury for our chest to increase your Bear skill ranks by 3, which now includes Boulder for a nice damage increase there too. Then comes the fun part for your pants. If you are doing content that is equal level to you or near it, where survivability isn't that big of a challenge, you absolutely want to use Tybalt's Will. The unique effect gives you up to 40% increased damage when you are unstoppable and for 4 seconds after. And in this build, we can sustain that 100% of the time, but arguably more importantly, this also gives you 50 spirit regen when you proc Unstoppable, so every time you do Trample, you now get 90 spirit instead of 40. And also anytime you dodge, because of the way that we build this, you gain 50 spirit as well. If you are doing harder content and need more armor, then you want to stick on Disobedience on a pair of pants with some nice defense aspects instead, and make sure that you have full ranks of Boulder on the pants. Tybalt's Will is worth more offensively than this is by quite a large amount, but if you want your defensive variant of the build to be even close, you need these Boulder ranks here for sure. On our two-handed weapon slot, we have the Metamorphic Stone aspect, which turns Boulder into a core skill that costs 50 spirit and has no cooldown, but it also increases its damage up to 240% of its maximum on a good roll in this slot, which is a ludicrous bonus. Note that I have this on a mace, but a staff would be the ideal weapon choice here for faster attack speed and crowd-controlled enemy damage. This is just the best weapon that I have found so far on my druid. On the boots, we have the Symbiotic aspect, and this is just another linchpin of the build, lowering the cooldowns of your abilities when you proc Nature's Fury, our key passive. This is what allows us to keep 100% Hurricane uptime, and it also allows us to cast Trample frequently for the bonus spirit and unstoppable procs, thanks to our next aspect, which is Trampled Earth. This makes Trample fire at a bunch of landslides out of the sides of it, but then also makes it count as an Earth skill. We don't really care about the landslides happening, they don't do all that much damage, but what we do care about is the part that this becomes an ability that gets cooldown reduction from the Symbiotic aspect, which is fantastic for us. Then we also have the Retaliation aspect as well, which gives you up to 40% bonus damage on core skills based on your fortified percentage. Then in your last slot, you want a solid Umbral aspect roll for up to 4 resource regen when applying a crowd control effect to an enemy. This is absolutely massive with this build. As long as you keep moving and rolling through groups of enemies with your boulders and your hurricane, this will regen your spirit like crazy, especially when you combine it with the boost from Tybalt's Will that I mentioned as well. This aspect obviously has no effect on single target encounters though, for which you want to swap it out to the aspect of natural balance. This build tends to alternate between wind shear casts and boulder casts just sort of naturally, and when you do that with this legendary, you get a nice crit damage boost to boulder and a nice crit chance boost to your storm skills too. That does it for the aspects then, so what about the stats and the affixes to aim for in this build? Well, above all else is actually crit damage and crit damage with earth skills if you can get them, because we have a number of crit damage multipliers around our boulder, which crits extremely frequently. Otherwise, attack speed is absolutely fantastic, spirit generation or spirit cost reduction is very, very good as well. Then you just want crit chance as well, because it does help. Lucky hit chance, damage against crowd controlled enemies, damage against close, damage with core, you know, the classic increases. As far as defensively though, you just want to use your remaining slots to max out your elemental resistances as much as you possibly can, and get as much bonus armor or bonus maximum life rolls as you can, as this build uses a number of uniques. The actual defensive slots are sort of low, so you have to make the most out of the affix slots that you do have. For a bit of an example of the different ways that I've slotted gear around here and talked about, this is the setup that I mentioned for big group clear, Umbral, and Tybalt's Will. Look at the spirit generation here. It is non-stop even if I just hold down Boulder and don't even use wind shear much. Then if you swap out Tybalt's Will for some defensive pants instead, you can see the damage dropping a bit and the energy regen drop a notable amount too, but the survivability does go up a lot if you do this. Then if you set the training dummies to be bosses so they can't be affected by crowd control normally, and move out Umbral for natural balance, you can see that with Tybalt's the actual spirit regen on those pants is pretty good even in single target, and the damage is still exceptional too, which makes this extremely functional on single target fights with this variation as well. Then let's talk about our vampiric powers for this, and of course the first on the list, as it is for a lot of people, is going to be Ravenous, which gives you lucky hit chance to increase your attack speed by a portion of your total movement speed. This increase is quite big and helps this build massively to just ramp up really quickly when it procs. Then we have Undying, which makes any skill that you cast heal you for 3% maximum life, which combined with Ravenous makes you extremely tanky to anything that isn't a one-shot. Then we have Anticipation as well for a 20% cooldown reduction on Petrify, which is totally worth having a slot. Prey on the Weak here gives us bonus vulnerable damage, as well as making all enemies that are affected by Vampiric Curse also be vulnerable, which synergizes very nicely with Metamorphosis, which makes your dodge give you Unstoppable for 4 seconds, and also apply Vampiric Curse to any enemies that you catch within it. This perfectly applies vulnerable to loads of enemies, while also activating Tybalt's Will. Then with that done, let's talk about our lovely Paragon board setup. Starting off at the beginning board, you want to head up the right side here, snaking around like this through the damage increase node to get to the Paragon glyph socket and stick in the Exploit glyph for bonus damage to vulnerable enemies. You'll then also want to grab the dexterity that's in the radius as well as the rare nodes before heading up the left side to get the Execute and attaching on the Earthen Devastation board here with the legendary power on the bottom right side. Head up and left through the rare node here and wrap around to get to the legendary node itself, which gives you 10% increased critical damage with earth skills, as well as a bonus equal to 20% of your damage versus crowd controlled enemy bonus to a maximum of a 40% multiplier. From there you want to round back up and head to the glyph socket itself here to stick in the Tectonic glyph. What this does is give you bonus critical damage with earth skills, as well as 15% bonus lucky hit chance as the bonus effect. Then we're going to be grabbing all the dexterity and rare nodes within the radius itself and head out the left side of the board to attach on the inner beast board like this with the legendary power on the right side. From here you want to head down to the lovely rare node here and the magic nodes around it, and then you want to wrap up to the legendary power of the board for inner beast, which is going to reduce your spirit cost by 10% for 5 seconds when you shapeshift up to 30% maximum. You will just have this constantly happening. Every time you wind shear, you go human form. Every time you boulder, you go bear form. When you trample, you go bear. When you hurricane, you go human. The back and forth cycle is a thing that we constantly go through to activate this. Then wrap back down and around to grab the maximum life rare node and head to the glyph socket of the board to stick in the territorial glyph here. This will increase your damage against close enemies and also increase the damage reduction that you have against close enemies if you activate the secondary bonus. Get the rare nodes and the easily accessible dexterity in the radius as well. Then you want to head out the bottom side of this board and attach on the ancestral guidance board with the legendary power in the top right side. You want to head down and right to get to the legendary power itself as quickly as you can, which gives you a 30% bonus damage multiplier for 5 seconds when you spend 75 spirit. So this is just sort of active constantly. Then you want to wrap back and around through the rare and magic nodes to get to the glyph socket here and stick in the werebear glyph, which will give you bonus damage with bear skills, as well as giving you bonus damage reduction while you're in bear form. You want to get the exact amount of willpower in here to power up the glyph itself, and then we're going to be going back to the Earthen's Devastation board and actually going out the top side of the board to attach Constricting Tendrils with the glyph socket on the bottom left side. You want to head to the glyph socket as directly as possible and stick in the Undaunted glyph here, which gives you a bunch of bonus damage while fortified, as well as giving you bonus damage reduction while you're fortified too. Then you want to get the surrounding rare and magic nodes of interest, as well as the majority of the intelligence, before heading out the left side of this board as well to attach our final stop, Survival Instincts, with the legendary node at the bottom side. Head directly to the legendary node itself, which will give you a bonus 1% 1% increased damage for every 1% difference in your current life percentage and your enemy's life percentage while in werebear form. This affects all of our boulders because they're being sent out from bear form. Then you want to round back over to the glyph socket itself and stick in the spirit glyph for bonus crit damage and a stacking bonus damage multiplier on enemies the more times that you get crits against them. After that, you just want to use your remaining points to get just enough dexterity to activate the secondary effect of that glyph, and then you're done. That does it as far as everything you need to put the build together for yourself then, but how do you actually play it? Well, Wind Shear gets you spirit when you use it, but also can apply vulnerable and also movement speed bonus to synergize into attack speed. So use this whenever you need spirit. Keep Hurricane active always. This is more important than anything else, because if you throw out a boulder without Hurricane on, it won't get you much value. Past that, if you have Blood Howl off cooldown, then you want to press it. If you have the energy to use Boulder, then you should be using Boulder. If you don't have the energy and Trample is available, you should use Trample, otherwise you want to just spam Wind Shear until you have enough to use Boulder. If using Tybalt's Will, make sure that you either use Trample or your Evade once every few seconds just to keep your damage bonuses up. And of course, Petrify as your ultimate, you want to use on any larger packs of enemies or on elites or bosses, you know, standard big damage cooldown usage. That just about does it then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this roundup and breakdown of this beautiful Boulder build for Season 2. I've always wanted Boulder to be a viable Druid build, and this season it has shattered that thought and become an absolutely meta one, which is something that I just never expected, but I'm so happy to be living through and taking part in. Let us know what other kinds of builds that you want to see us do in the future, and we'll take a stab at it if we find it interesting. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.